Dzień dobry.
Good morning.
Witam Państwa na
Welcome
spotkaniu z
to the
firmą
meeting
Spyrosoft
with
po ogłoszeniu
Spyrosoft
wyników
Company,
finansowych spółki za
the
pierwszy
announcement of
kwartał
the financials for
2025
Q1
roku. Widzę, że
2025.
Państwo do nas cały
As I
czas
can see,
dołączają.
you keep
Zatem
joining
dajmy
us.
czas
Therefore, let's
wszystkim
allow
tym, którzy
time
chcą
to all
wziąć
those
udział w
who wish
dzisiejszym
to
spotkaniu, żeby
participate
mieli
in
szansę do
today's
nas
meeting
dołączyć.
so they have an
Let me
opportunity
switch to English for a while. Good morning and welcome to our meeting with Spyrosoft following the publication of the company's Q1 25 financial results. Just a quick note for our English-speaking participants. We are really pleased to see more and more international investors joining us at each meeting. It's something that makes us genuinely happy. We are providing translation into English, so you can easily adjust your audio to your preferences. So please select icon interpretation in your Zoom menu and select the preferred audio. It can be English, of course, Polish or original. So please do it now, as the rest of the presentation will be conducted in Polish. So let me switch to Polish right now. Jeszcze raz dzień dobry, witam Państwa na spotkaniu.
So welcome
z grupą
again to
Spyrosoft.
the meeting with
Będziemy omawiać wyniki
Spyrosoft
pierwszego
Group.
kwartału
We'll be discussing the
2025
financial
roku.
results for Q1
Jeszcze raz po polsku ta
2025.
sama
Yet
informacja.
again,
Mamy
the same
tłumaczenie
information
symultaniczne
in
na język
Polish. We
angielski
have
oraz na język polski.
simultaneous
Jeżeli
interpretation
odpowiedzi na
between
pytania
English
będą
and
udzielone
Polish.
przez zarząd
If
w języku
the
angielskim,
answers are
to
provided in
można
English,
łatwo
then
dostosować
you
dźwięk do
can
swoich
easily
preferencji.
adjust
Prosimy wybrać
the sound to
tylko
your preferences,
tłumaczenie i wskazać
check the
preferowany kanał audio
interpretation
polski,
icon,
angielski
and
lub
indicate
oryginalny
your
albo bez
preferred
tłumaczenia.
channel,
W trakcie
English,
naszego
Polish, or
spotkania Państwa
Floor.
mikrofony i kamery są
During the
wyłączone. Po
meeting, our
prezentacji zarządu przejdziemy do
mics and
sesji Q&A,
cameras are turned off.
gdzie
After
będą mogli
the
Państwo
board
zadawać
presentation,
pytania
we
poprzez
pass on to
przycisk
the
Q&A
Q&A
w menu
session where
Zoom.
you'll be able to
Zresztą
ask
te pytania
questions on
można
menu
spisywać
Zoom.
podczas
By
całego
the way,
naszego
the
spotkania.
questions can be
Będziemy je po
also
prostu na koniec naszego spotkania odczytywali,
written
odpowiadali na tyle
throughout the
precyzyjnie, na
meeting,
ile będziemy
except that we will
potrafili.
be just
Zatem tyle
asking them
tytułem
at the end of the
technicznego
meeting as precisely
wprowadzenia.
as we can.
Chciałbym
So
teraz
much
przywitać
for
gospodarzy naszego
introduction.
spotkania,
I'd
pan
like to
Konrad Wajskie,
welcome
prezes
the
zarządu. Dzień dobry, panie prezesie.
host of our meeting, Konrad
Sebastian
Wajske,
Łękawa, członek
CEO.
zarządu
Good morning.
odpowiedzialny za operacje.
Sebastian
Dzień dobry panu
Łękawa,
Sebastianie.
COO. Good morning.
Wojciech
Good morning.
Godmaruś, członek
Wojciech
zarządu odpowiedzialny za
Godmarów,
finanse. Dzień dobry panie Wojciech.
CFO.
Dzień dobry wszystkim.
Good morning,
Panie
everyone.
prezesie, to jest ten moment, kiedy oddaję głos i
Mr.
znikam do
President,
czasu
over to
sesji pytań i
the
odpowiedzi. Do usłyszenia. Do zobaczenia.
CEO, and
Dziękuję
I'll
bardzo.
be
Witam
vanishing. Thank you very
Państwa
much,
bardzo serdecznie
and
na prezentacji wyników
welcome
za pierwszy
to
kwartał
the presentation of
bieżącego roku.
the financials for Q1 2025.
Zaczynajmy zatem.
Let's get started then.
Jak Państwo
As
za
you
chwilkę zobaczą,
will
wyniki
see
są
in a
dobre.
moment, the results
Pierwszy
are
kwartał
good.
2025
Q1 2025
kwartałem dobrym dla
was a
spółki,
good
był lepszy
quarter
niż pierwszy
for the
kwartał
company,
zeszłego
better
roku.
than Q1 last year.
Popatrzmy pokrótce na podstawowe dane.
Let's take a brief look at the basic data.
Jeżeli chodzi o przychody,
When
to
it
wzrosły
comes
o
to
trzecią mniej
the
więcej.
revenues, they grew roughly by
Warto zauważyć, że
one-third.
większość z tego
It's
wzrostu to był
worth
wzrost organiczny.
noticing that most of the
Spółka
growth was
Codini, której
organic.
kontrolne
Codibly,
udziały kupiliśmy w
whose
zeszłym
control
roku,
package was bought last
dodała
year,
nieco ponad 5%
contributed
do tych
a
przychodów.
little bit above
Patrząc na
5% to
EBITDA,
the
tutaj
revenues.
widzimy
As
dość
we look at the
znaczący wzrost
EBITDA, we can see a
do kwoty prawie
significant
17
increase
milionów
to
złotych.
almost 17
Jak
million
również
zlotys,
marże EBITDA,
as well
jak
as the
widzimy,
EBITDA
również
margin,
wzrosła
which
całkiem
also increased quite significantly.
Co warto podkreślić, to rozpoczęliśmy
As
przegląd opcji strategicznych.
what we
Jest
should
to związane z raportowaniem.
emphasize that we've
Jest to związane z naszą
started our
strategią,
strategic
którą
review. This is
ogłosiliśmy
also
jakiś czas
connected with
temu.
the strategy
Jak
we announced
Państwo
some time
wiedzą,
ago. As
naszą
you will
strategią
know,
jest
it is our
debiut na
strategy
dużej
to
międzynarodowej giełdzie. Podczas tego procesu
start being
się
quoted at a
również
major international
alternatywą do tego debiutu. Planujemy
stock
ten
exchange
przegląd
market.
zakończyć
We're also
do końca
contemplating
tego roku.
alternative
I w
options.
momencie, kiedy
We
go
are
zakończymy, wtedy
planning on
poinformujemy,
the
jaki dalszy
finalization
plan
of that
działania
review
będzie.
towards the end of the year, and then we will be informing you about the further steps.
Kontrakt z BBC, o którym
We
Państwo
have
wiedzą.
a contract with the BBC,
Pokazujemy
as you will
te
know.
wartości,
We are
ponieważ
showing
Państwo
these
pytają, jak duży
figures
jest ten
because you're
kontrakt
asking
w
how large
stosunku do
this contract is
przychodów całej grupy.
compared to the
Tutaj widać, że
company's
jest 15%, więc
revenues.
stąd
As
można
we can see, it's
powiedzieć, że
15%, so definitely
zależymy
we
od
cannot
tego
say
klienta,
that we are
natomiast jest to
dependent on
klient
this
dobry.
customer. However, it's a good
Współpraca,
customer,
uważam, będzie
the cooperation
kontynuowana
with
przez kilka
whom we will be
najbliższych lat.
continued
To, co
over
warto podkreślić, to
the next couple of years, as I believe. What needs to be emphasized is a large diversification of the group. Hence, the weaknesses in some sectors to be mentioned, which are compensated by revenues and gains in other sectors. Diversification is the main thing that we're trying to do. That's the chief component of our strategy. The number of customers is constantly growing, which obviously translates into revenues. At the end of Q1, there were almost 200 of them. What should also be emphasized is the reduction of the so-called bench. The bench is relatively small, and I don't think that would change. This also is also connected with the fact that we are passing to the contractor level, increasing the number of freelancers while maintaining permanent staff at the same level, which means that the relative number of freelancers is growing. We had a headcount of almost 1,900 people, and that number keeps growing. As regards our locations, we don't have any major changes. However, we've changed the business sectors to which we provide our services, and Sebastian will tell you more about this in his part of the intervention. The peer group comparison and what is also involved are the prospects for the future to be mentioned by Sebastian. As you can see, as per the peer group that we keep benchmarking ourselves to have a comparison, our company looks better. What should be emphasized or observed is that the company does not know what's coming. Therefore, some companies are presenting forecasts that are not excessively optimistic. Obviously, we are not showing our forecasts, but we keep maintaining that this year should be a good one for our company. What should be emphasized, and you'll be able to see, is that the share of the automotive industry has decreased significantly in our revenues, but it has been offset by with a revenge by other industries. This means that we've been shifting towards other sectors, and so far we've been able to compensate on that drop in other areas with a revenge. This also is connected with the fact that we keep investing in other sectors by investing into daughter companies, but we're also launching new service lines or technological horizontals, as well as changing business units, the industries we're working for. Sebastian will tell you more about it. Owing to this, the drop in a single industry has been so far compensated by the increase in other industries. What makes us different as compared to the peer group is that we are first a slightly smaller company, and secondly, we're a company that was formed a little bit later and under different market realities. Therefore, we were right off focusing on on technology niches. Therefore, we passed from the extension model to the model where we deliver specific value to our customers, which also involves technological consulting that we provide increasingly. Therefore, our specialization is slightly narrower than that of the peer group, and we also deliver more of technological consulting than that group, which means that as compared to that group, we grow faster. The financial results, therefore, I'm giving the floor over to Wojtek. Thank you, Konrad. As mentioned by Konrad in the first slide, the consolidated results of the whole group amounted to 144 million, and that's an increase by 33%. Konrad also emphasized that most of that growth can be attributed to organic growth. Only several percentage points result from the fact that Colibri has joined our group. Here we are presenting, this slide, we're presenting our strategy regarding revenues, and as you can see, we still feel comfortable when it comes to the delivery of that strategy, given the current realities that Konrad has described in his intervention relative to the peer group. When it comes to the EBITDA, it amounted to 16.9 million, and it's almost 44% higher than a year before. In Q1, the EBITDA margin is at the level of 11.8, which means that it's below the lower bracket that we presented for the strategy. This is impacted by the lower remuneration level increase, also the control of the back office growth, which also translates, stems from the fact that our staffing structure is transforming. Therefore, the back office costs are not growing as fast as the entire group, especially its revenues. And the third key factor impacting the EBITDA is the costs of the so-called bench, which are way lower than in Q1 2024. On this slide, we can see the changes of FX rates, and if you have reviewed our previous interventions and reports, those differences were much higher when it comes to those FX rates. First, it shows that they are different and they don't diverge so much among the individual years. The net profit amounted to 9.1 million zlotys, and it was 165% higher than a year before. This was largely impacted by the R&D tax relief, which will be much more visible towards the end of the year, because currently, during this presentation, we're only using the surplus that we have connected with that R&D tax relief that we have from the previous years. When it comes to the simplified statement of results, the most important things that I mentioned, namely the general management costs don't increase as fast as the revenues. This is connected with the freelancers and our approach to generally controlling the back office costs. Okay, and a further part, Sebastian, yes. Here, ladies and gentlemen, we have a split of revenues by sector. This slide shows how important diversification is, because as we can see on a quarter-to-quarter basis, automotive dropped as signaled before. And in most of the other business units, we have significant growth that has nicely compensated on the decrease in the automotive sector. As we can see, the increase in the impact of BBC in media and entertainment is very visible. There are other items that I'd like to emphasize here, namely in hard tech. We have the vertical of high tech and software. HR tech, where companies delivering solutions for the HR sector in the market, and we've noticed that among our customers there was an increasing number of customers having a broader approach. Companies that deliver software solutions to other solutions than the business units that we've addressed so far. Therefore, we've decided on making sure that on placing HR tech as part of high tech and software, and this will be growing because here we have software manufacturers for other sectors differing from the ones that we had so far, to be exemplified by Google, high tech, or Amazon. And another thing is that, well, the structure seems to be in robotics, it seems flat, but this stems from the fact that in robotics we had a customer attributed to the chemical industry. This stemmed from the fact that robotics and chemistry were covered by synergy, and we decided to identify chemicals as a separate business unit because we can see a lot of potential there. Hence, chemicals are presented as a new business unit in our portfolio. Okay, that's it. Here, it's actually the same picture, except that we can see the percentages presented on a quarter-to-quarter basis. When it comes to the geographic structure of revenues, we have a significant increase in the UK compared to the DACH countries. Actually, the UK has switched places with Germany, Austria, and Switzerland when it comes to the structure of revenues. As for the prospects, I may just ask you for the next slide. When it comes to the prospects, the prospects for the new markets that we provide our services to, they are stable, excepting the automotive market where the situation is uncertain. However, the key thing for us is that we are growing in other sectors, which diversifies the uncertainty in the automotive business. What it will be like, it's hard to say, but we're striving to make sure that it's as best as possible. Besides, the geopolitical situation also gives rise to some uncertainty for the ensuing quarters, and I think that we can see the picture 2 or 3 quarters ahead. What's it going to be like later? It's hard to say. When it comes to the employment situation, it's favorable for us. We are still capable of hiring programmers in response to our job announcements. We receive a lot of CVs. We can see a certain difficulty in attracting senior people with a lot of experience in terms of AI, and it's really a hard job to find them. When it comes to AI, we can see a lot of increase in clients' interests. As I mentioned in the previous meeting, the AI component is actually present in every project that we pursue. When it comes to acquisition opportunities, we are still interested, and we're on a lookout for companies that we'd like to join our group. We have a lot of appetite, and as mentioned by Konrad, we are interested in Asia, mostly India, but we're also having a close look at US companies because that's the market where we are generating relatively little in terms of revenues, and we'd like to increase the share of US in the group portfolio. When it comes to strategic options, we are preparing to be listed on a foreign exchange market or pursue an alternative development path. The process is expected to be completed by the end of 2025. When it comes to the strategy, we're only sustaining the strategy that we've identified for 2025-26. Oh, sorry, one more slide. When it comes to the prospects for the individual business units in the upcoming quarters, the automotive industry, well, the prospects are still negative in our view, which is connected with the turmoil, mostly in the German market. When it comes to connectivity and industry, automation, financial services, and e-mobility, we can see a positive trend for a couple of quarters, actually. In the remaining quarters, the situation is stable, I should say favorable from our point of view. We can see an increase in the customers' interest. They are asking for the expansion of the teams, placing more orders. There is still some price pressure when it comes to our services. However, it occurs in the case of all the vendors, and in our view, we are coping with it quite well. Thank you very much.
Panowie, bardzo dziękuję za przeprowadzenie nas przez
Gentlemen, thank you
prezentację.
very
Let me
much for
switch to
guiding
English
us
for a while,
into
just to remind you that
through
we
our
are providing
presentation.
live interpretation, so you can find the interpretation icon in your Zoom menu and switch your audio to the preferred language. It might be Polish, English, or original. So I'll switch back to Polish right now. Dziękuję bardzo jeszcze raz.
Thank you very much
Przechodzimy
again.
do sesji
We're
pytań
passing
i
on to the
odpowiedzi.
Q&A
Oczywiście
session.
pytania już się pojawiają. Pan
Of
Cezary
course, the
Maliszewski,
questions are already
inwestor
cropping up.
indywidualny, ma pytanie, jak
Cezary
przebiegają starania
Maliszewski
spółki do
has a
gotowości
question
obsługi sektora
how
defense.
the
Czy niezbędne jest uzyskanie
preparations of the company
certyfikatów
are doing when
natowskich
it
lub
comes to
innych, jeśli
providing
tak, na jakim
services to
etapie
the
jest
defense sector.
spółka
Isn't it
w tej
necessary
sprawie?
to obtain NATO certificates? And if so, what is the stage for the company? I can take it. The company is at the stage of obtaining necessary certificates, and as we look at what we need from Poland's perspective, so first of all, we need three things. That's the certification of industry security to have access to classified information. This process takes around 6 to 9 months. We're in the process. Then we have the certification for police. It takes a couple of months. Then we have WSK for certificate for import and export. We'll soon have it, I think. Having those things, we're ready to provide services in the global market. Do we need a certificate for that at this moment? No, because to take another step forward, we need the three things that I've mentioned.
Dziękuję bardzo.
Thank you very much.
Łukasz Fischer,
Mr. Lucas Fischer is asking, what
strategicznych w
are
tym
the costs
kwartale,
of
jakie
the
mogą być w
strategic
przyszłości?
options review this quarter, and what might there be in future? When it comes to our cooperation with Cascadia company, as mentioned by Konrad, Cascadia is supporting us in researching the market, whether any alternative options are better for us than a foreign stock exchange, which is a goal derived from our strategy. What I can say is that when it comes to the remuneration, several $1,000, our US advisors will help us in that analysis, and it will, when it comes to the further costs, it will be determined by the decision to be made by us towards the end of the year after in-depth analysis. Thank you very much. Next question, Przemek Staniszewski from Stockwatch. The bench is very low, claims Przemek. Could you remind us how much it was in Q1 compared to Q4 2024 and compared to Q1 2024? I can take it, Konrad. You remember? If not, we can just send the information to Przemysław's email. Yes, but was Q1 was around 7%, Q4 it was 2 point something like in Q1 2025. Similar to what we have in Q1 2025.
Pytanie jeszcze od pana
Okay.
Przemka
One more
Staniszewskiego.
question from Przemek
Czy można
Staniszewski.
nieco więcej powiedzieć o
Can you
kontrakcie
tell us a little bit
BBC,
more about the BBC
biznesowo?
contract in
Wzrosła
business
sprzedaż
terms?
wskazuje, że
The
są
increasing
z was
sales
bardzo
indicate
zadowoleni.
that
Do
they
tego
are very
kilka
happy
następnych
with
danych.
you.
Do kiedy
To be
jest
coupled with some
zaplanowany ten
financial
kontrakt?
data.
Czy długo
Until
trwa? Jakie są
when
szacowane
is the
przychody
contract
w trakcie
planned?
całego kontraktu?
How long does it take?
Jak wiele
What
osób
are the
ze strony
estimated
spółki jest
reviews throughout
zaangażowanych?
the contract, and how many people in the company
To,
are
co możemy
involved?
powiedzieć,
Okay,
to,
what we
dane,
can
które
share
opublikowaliśmy,
is
więc
that
można
we have
sprawdzić.
published the data. You can
Kontrakt,
check it. As far as I can
kwota
remember,
całkowita
the
kontraktu to
total
było
contract value was
30 kilka milionów
30 plus
funtów.
million
Kontrakt jest na kilka
pounds
lat,
sterling.
na 3,
The
jeżeli też dobrze pamiętam.
contract is
Jeżeli chodzi
concluded
o
for a
ilość
couple of
osób,
years,
która jest
3,
zaangażowana,
if I
jest
remember
to
correctly, when it comes to the number of
jest to
people
wiele
involved.
projektów, które
I
wykonujemy
mean,
dla tej
these are
firmy.
numerous projects that we
Natomiast
perform
co
for that
opublikowaliśmy
company,
osób,
but the
które
total number of
pracują
people
przy tych projektach,
who are
grubo
working
przekracza setkę.
on those projects
Są to osoby głównie
exceeds
zlokalizowane w Zjednoczonym
100, well
Królestwie.
exceeds 100.
I
These are people
całkowita
mostly
wartość tego
located in the
kontraktu,
UK,
co
and the
jest
total
ogranicza
contract
nas powiem,
value I mean, it's capped, but when it comes to the continuation of those projects, we have to remember that BBC is a company subsidized by the UK government, and depending on how it will depend on how the UK government will be willing to subsidize BBC. Planning is performed on a biannual basis. Currently, we're certain of what will happen till the end of September, and in a way until the end of the year. That's what I can say. But since BBC itself is not certain how much money they will obtain in the next semester, I hate to provide additional data. What I can confirm is what we provided in the reports that, and I can confirm that. But I agree with Przemek that they are very happy with us, and frankly speaking, you rarely get confronted with so many compliments. By the way, this customer is very prestigious, and I think that the customer satisfaction will also be maintained at the same level. The chances are to obtain also other contracts owing to their satisfaction with our services, but these are public tenders, so it's a process that is gonna take a
Brawo, panie
while.
prezesie. Patryk Stańczak,
Great.
inwestor indywidualny,
Mr.
kwartał z rzędu rosną
President,
przychody
Patrick
BSG.
Stańczak is
Czy
asking, it's
można
the
założyć, że
second
niekorzystny
quarter in the row that
niekorzystny trend,
BSG
który
revenues
rozpoczął się
are growing? Can we
czwartym
assume
kwartale
that the
2023
unfavorable
roku
trend that
mamy
started
już
in
za sobą?
Q4 2023 is behind us?
Myślę, że tak.
I think so.
Tak bym powiedział. Natomiast
I should say so.
w tej branży chyba nikt
However,
nie
in this industry,
zdobędzie się
I
na
don't
to,
think
żeby powiedzieć coś
anyone
ze
will be
100%
prepared
pewnością.
to say
Natomiast
anything
według
with
informacji,
100%
jakie mamy,
assuredness. But
założeń,
per the
które mamy,
information that I have, per the
sądzę,
assumptions
że
that we have,
kwartały
I think so.
kolejne nie powinny
I
przynieść
think
mniejszych
the
przychodów,
next
ale
quarter should not
jest to obarczone
bring
ciągle pewnym ryzykiem. To
lower
jest jednak
revenues.
biznes
However, it's
projektowy,
still
gdzie
laden
klient się
with
kończą,
some
nowe się
risks.
muszą
It's a
zacząć.
project-based
Widzimy dość
business
solidny
where
pipeline
projects
zamówień,
have to
natomiast
finish, other
no nie
ones
dam
have to
sobie uciąć
start.
ręki, że
We can
on na
see
pewno
a
w 100%
solid
przełoży
pipeline
się na
of
wszystkie
revenues,
zamówienia.
but I
Natomiast moje
wouldn't bet
założenie
my
prywatne
head
jest
on the
takie,
fact
że
that it will translate
na
into
pewno
all the
będzie
revenues. But my
ale to
private
jest
assumption is
ciągle
that it
założenie.
will definitely not be
No
any
to
worse, but
dokładnie
it's
tych
still
samych
an
wątków
assumption.
pan Patryk Stańczak
Exactly along the same
Konkurencja mówi o
lines,
rosnącym
Patrick
rynku
Stańczak is
potencjalnych
asking, the
kontraktów, które nie
competition
do końca
is
przekładają się
talking
na
about
podpisane
the
umowy. Czy spółka
potential
utożsamia
funnel
się
of
z tym
potential
stwierdzeniem? Czy
contracts that
są
don't
pierwsze
fully
oznaki
translate
zmiany takiej
into
sytuacji?
contracts concluded.
Ja
Does the
mogę
company
powiedzieć tak,
identify
bo
with
my
that
już o tym
statement,
mówiliśmy,
and
że
are
my
there any first
te oznaki jak
symptoms of that
najbardziej
situation?
widzimy
Sebastian?
i już któryś
Yes, I
tam
can say
punkt,
that.
którymś
I
tam
can
naszym
tell you about it.
spotkaniu
We can
mówimy o
see
tym,
some
że sytuacja
symptoms
dla nas
of
się
it, and
poprawia, bo
it's
widzimy większe
another
zainteresowanie
meeting
po
that we
stronie
are actually
klientów. Te
mentioning
procesy
this.
decyzyjne
The situation is looking up.
nadal
The
często długo
decisions
trwają, no ale my
are still
widzimy
taking quite
zdecydowanie
long, but
większe
we can see
zainteresowanie. Ja myślę, że
growing
w
interest.
sprzedaży to jest jakby sprzedaż to jest
And I
też
think that
statystyka,
when it
trzeba
comes
mieć odpowiednio
to
dużo tematów
sales,
w ręku, żeby
sales is a matter of
statystycznie
statistics. You have to
przy
have
odpowiednich poziomach
enough
wartości
in your
wpadła
funnel to make
zakładana
sure
ilość tematów.
that
Ja myślę,
it will
że u nas
translate
wygląda
into
to
the
póki co
appropriate
nieźle.
number of contracts.
Tych
I think
rozmów z
it's
klientami
looking quite
prowadzimy
well in our
dużo.
case. We are
No
involved
ale
in
ten proces
numerous
trwa.
conversations with
Czy
our
trwa
customers.
krócej?
However,
Myślę,
the
że trochę
process
krócej, ale
lasts
zdecydowanie
a
tak
little
jak
bit.
mówiłem wcześniej, my widzimy
Is it taking shorter?
porównując
I think a
powiedzmy
little bit shorter, but
zeszły
as we
rok
compare, for instance,
do tego
last
pierwszego
year
kwartału
to
widzimy, to jest
Q1,
widać w naszych wynikach, widzimy,
can also
widzimy
tell it
dużą
by our
poprawę.
results. We can observe a major
Dziękuję, pan Patryk
Tutaj jeszcze
improvement.
dodać jedną rzecz.
May I
To
add one more
proszę nam
thing?
wybaczyć pewną ostrożność w
Please
wypowiedzi, ale jesteśmy
forgive us
świadomi
that
tego,
we
że
are
sytuacja w
so
automotive może
conservative in
jeszcze
our
ulec
statements, but we are
pogorszeniu
aware of the
i
fact that the
zdajemy sobie
situation in
sprawę,
the
że
automotive
ten
might
ubytek
look even worse, and we
potencjalny przychodowy, który
realize
może wystąpić,
that the
będziemy musieli
potential
uzupełnić nowymi
loss
branżami.
in
Gdyby
revenues
sytuacja
might
w
have to
automotive
be
była
compensated
stabilna,
for
bądź też
from
nawet
other
dobra,
industries.
to
If the
nasz
situation
entuzjazm
in the
tutaj
automotive
z
industry
Państwem
were
byłby o wiele
stable
większy.
or even good, our enthusiasm in talking to you would be
No
much
dobrze, to
worse.
jeśli jesteśmy przy wątku
Okay,
automotive, to
since we're
pytania,
talking about the automotive
czy spółka
industry, there are
zmniejszyła ilość
questions.
specjalistów sektora
Has
automotive, czy
the
znajdują oni
company
pracę w innych
decreased the
sektorach u
number
was?
of specialists in the automotive business, or are they
Myślę, że dwa razy
finding
tak w tym wypadku. Nieco
work in
zmniejszyliśmy
other
liczbę
sectors? I
osób,
think it would be twice
tych,
yes. We have
które po
slightly
prostu,
decreased the
byliśmy w
number
stanie
of
zapewnić
people.
projektów,
For
natomiast
those of
spora
you,
część
of
znalazła
those of whom we
pracę
couldn't
w innych sektorach, co zresztą
find
widać
projects for, but some of them have found
było widać na
work in
slajdzie,
other
który
sectors. You
Sebastian
could tell it on
Te
the slide
kompetencje są
shown
w
by
sporym
Sebastian.
stopniu przenaszane
Those
pomiędzy
competences are
sektorami.
largely transferable among sectors. And if we can launch the defense sector, which, as Sebastian mentioned, is a process that will take some time, that transferability will be even greater. I have to realize that it's a process. It definitely won't happen overnight.
Dziękuję. Ten dialog z inwestorami się układa bardzo dobrze, bo pytanie właśnie
Thank you.
dotyczy
And
tego
now we
samego
have a
wątku.
question about the same
Jak
thread.
państwo doceniają, czy
How do you
obecnej pewnej
evaluate,
sytuacji w
given
sektorze automotive
the uncertain
nie było
situation
błędem
in the
rozpoczęcie
automotive
starań o
business?
pozyskanie
Wasn't it a
certyfikatów
mistake
defense z większym
to
wyprzedzeniem? Jak państwo oceniają to w perspektywie czasu
to
teraz?
start obtaining the
ja chętnie
certificates
wezmę to
with a
pytanie
greater
i myślę, że to nie było
anticipation?
błędem.
Let me
My,
take that
to nie
question.
jest
I don't
tak,
think
że
that
my
was a
o
mistake.
defensie zaczęliśmy myśleć
It's
na
not that we
jesień,
started
jesienią tego
thinking
roku,
about the
czy też na
defense
początku
industry
tego roku.
in
My jakby temat rozpoznawaliśmy już
last
gdzieś,
fall
zdaje się, od
or
pewnego
the
czasu.
beginning of this
Natomiast to
year.
jest długi proces.
We've been pondering that topic
jakby
for a long time,
to nie
but
jest tak, że
however, it's a
dzisiaj
lengthy
dyskutujemy
process. It's
dopiero
not
pewne
that
tematy
today we
finansowe
decide,
i od
okay,
razu wiemy,
we're
jakie
going for defense
certyfikaty, w jaki
topics,
sposób
and
podejść
right
do
away we
kwestii.
know which
Ja myślę,
certificates we
że
need and how to
na pewno
approach
by
it.
nam pomogło, gdybyśmy te
I'm sure it
certyfikaty
would have
mieli już
helped
teraz.
us
Natomiast
if
myślę,
we
że
had
trudno
the
sobie zarzucić,
certificates in
że
place right now, but it's hard to say that
jakby
it's a
zacząć to
mistake
wcześniej albo przewidzieć sytuację, jaka
and
będzie
that
miała
we
miejsce
could have
w automotive. Ja myślę, że
anticipated the
jesteśmy
situation in the
na dobrej
automotive
drodze.
business. I think we're on the right
Natomiast
track.
też nie zakładałbym,
However, I wouldn't
że
assume
jakby defense będzie jakoś dla nas
that
znaczący w
the
najbliższym
defense
czasie.
industry will be
Pamiętajmy, że to w większości są
all
tematy
that
o charakterze
significant
wymogów
going
publicznych.
forward
To
or in
trwa,
the
to nie
near
jest
future,
proste.
because
Natomiast jak
mostly
już wejdziemy w ten
such
obszar,
contracts
to
are
możemy liczyć na dość
governed
interesujące
by
i duże
public
projekty.
procurement procedures, and it takes
Jarosław
time.
Gadomski,
But once we hit it,
pytanie o
we might obtain
konserwatywny
interesting
albo
projects.
negatywny
Jarosław
scenariusz ograniczenia
Gadomski, the
pracy dla
question is
BBC we
about
wrześniu.
a
Jak bardzo
negative
może wpłynąć na wyniki
scenario
grupy, czy może spowodować
of
skok poziomu
limitation work for BBC after September?
Jeżeli chodzi o kontrakt BBC
How can
i
it
osoby,
impact
które
the
tam są
group
zatrudnione,
and the
mają świadomość
leap
tego, że to
in
są
the
projekty, a projekt
bench
z
level?
definicji jest
As
rzeczą, która się
regards
kończy. Spora część osób, które
the
pracują nad
project, by
kontraktami
definition, it's a project. Many
dla
people
BBC,
who work on
to są
BBC
osoby, które
contracts are
są
people
freelancerami, bądź
who
są
are
to osoby pożyczone z innych
freelancers
spółek. To sprawia, że
or
one są oczywiście
loaned from other
nieco droższe, więc więcej
companies.
nas
That
kosztują,
means that they
ale
are a little
robimy
bit
to
more
dlatego, żeby
expensive. They
właśnie
cost
uniknąć
us
łatwo w
more,
momencie,
but
gdyby coś się z
we
kontraktem
are
BBC
doing
wydarzyło.
this
Dlatego
not
jeżeli
to increase the bench,
od września
supposing
się
something
dowiemy
happened with the
miesiąca,
BBC
to
contract.
jest
That's
oczywiście bardzo
therefore
teoretyczne rozważanie, bo
supposing
takiego
very
scenariusza w ogóle nie
theoretically, purely
przewidujemy.
theoretically, because we're not even envisaging that
Stracilibyśmy
scenario. Supposing
całkowicie BBC.
we
To
lose
pewna część tych osób
BBC
usiądzie na
after
ławce, ale
September,
większość po prostu zostanie
but
oddana
a
bądź po
major
prostu
part
ludzie się
of
do tego
them
pożyczyli,
will be
bądź
back
też
on the bench, but
pójdzie
a major
działać dalej
proportion
jako
will be
freelancerzy.
returned
Dlatego
to
to
other
nawet
companies
gdyby
we have
te
loaned
BBC
them from,
zakończyło się nagle,
or will
to
just
na
go
pewno
to
nie
work as
będzie to dla nas
freelancers
jakiś duży
someplace.
problem.
So
Tak.
even
Natomiast to, że się
supposing the
BBC
BBC
zakończy
contract
nagle, jest
is
bardzo, bardzo,
concluded
bardzo nieoptymalne.
suddenly, that wouldn't pose a major problem. However,
Dziękuję za to wyjaśnienie.
a sudden
Pytanie dobrze,
conclusion
tak?
of
Co
a
będzie,
BBC
jeżeli
contract
100
is
ponad
very,
100,
very,
150
very
członków
unprobable.
wsiądzie na ławce, prawda?
So
Czy
that's
to
the
jest
question:
tak,
whether
że będzie
100 to 150
bardzo
people will
szybkiej?
be back on the
Nie,
bench. Will we
czy
suffer all that
jesteśmy
much? No.
pomni doświadczeń z przeszłości,
We
jesteśmy
are
przygotowani na taki
cognizant
scenariusz,
of
nie będzie aż, nie będzie
of
tak.
the experiences from the past,
To
prepared
jeszcze w
for
tym
the
samym
scenario,
wątku.
so
Czy
it won't be
spółka
that bad.
przygotowuje się na wzrost
And much
sprzedaży w
along the
kolejnych
same lines,
okresach, bo
is the
widzieliśmy
company
spory wzrost
preparing for
zatrudnienia
an
kwartał do
increase
kwartału.
in
Czy sprzedaż
the
w kolejnych okresach będzie rosła, czy to raczej kwestia
upcoming
obsługi aktualnych
quarters?
kontraktów
Will it be
w
growing,
kontekście
or is it
niskiej
a
łapki?
matter of
Sebastianie, chciałbyś powiedzieć?
providing services
Jeżeli
in the
patrzymy
context of
tak, oczywiście
the
bardzo chętnie, jeżeli
low
patrzymy
bench
na
level?
sprzedaż na kolejne
Sebastian?
kwartały, to
Yes,
ja
if we
myślę,
look
że
at
wiadomo,
the sales in the next quarters,
myślę, że ten kwartał jest
I
już dopiero
believe
drugi,
that
trzeci,
it's the
pewnie trochę czwarty. Myślę, że
the
my zakładamy, że ta
second,
sprzedaż będzie
probably
rosła,
third
tak?
and
To
fourth
jakby nie
quarter,
zakładamy, że
we
będzie
assume
spadała.
that
To
the sales
oczywiście
will be
mówimy tutaj
growing,
o
definitely
całej
not falling.
firmie.
We're talking
Tak
about
jak on wcześniej mówił,
the
też
whole company,
powtarzałem, że
as
w
mentioned
automotive
by
sytuacja jest,
contract.
jest
I was
niepewna.
also
Natomiast
mentioning that the situation in the automotive
pozostałe
industry
business unity poza
was
automotive radzą sobie
uncertain, but
nieźle
all the
i
other
tutaj
business
patrząc
units
też
other
na
than the
pipeline
automotive
zamówień od
are
klientów,
doing good. And as we look
ja
at the
jestem pozytywnie
pipeline,
nastawiony na kolejny kwartał.
I'm positive towards the
Dziękuję
next
bardzo.
quarters.
Jeszcze
Thank you very
pan
much.
Cezary Maliszewski
Now,
dopytuje, czy
Cezary
pozyskali
Maliszewski
państwo ostatnio
asks
klienta
whether you
generującego
have
przychody
recently
powyżej 5%
acquired a
całości.
customer
Ja też mogę to
generating
wziąć.
or one a
Panie
customer
Cezary, ja
generating
przypomnę, że
revenues over
bardzo
5%.
często
I can
projekty,
take it
które
as well.
znaczy zawsze jak zaczynamy projekt właściwie z klientem,
Always, whenever we start a project with a
to
customer,
ta współpraca zaczyna się
that
przeważnie od
cooperation
jakiegoś małego
starts
zaangażowania
with
i
little
później
involvement
jakby dla klienta
Then
odtworzenie współpracy z nowym
to
dostawcą,
launch cooperation with a new provider or vendor such as Spyrosoft or some other business takes some effort. The customer wants to be sure that they have found the right partner. Therefore, that cooperation starts slowly. Over time, if everything works as planned, the customer is happy and we deliver, then that cooperation is on the increase. Now, the question is whether we have recently won. We would need to define what recently means, but let's say over half a year, whether we've won customers capable of generating 5% going forward? The answer is yes. Thank you very much for that explanation. Let's pass on to financial questions. Could you comment on the decrease in percentage EBIT compared to what could be observed over the last couple of quarters, Q3 24 or Q4 24? How could you comment on that? So that's my section. The other guys have already said everything. So more of the financial stuff. If we compare the EBITDA it's similar to Q3, and Q4 stems from the decrease in the margin in Q4. As you review all the fourth quarters, ever since I've been dealing with IT companies finance, Q4 tends to be better because companies finish their budgets, we close our projects. Therefore, that margin is always higher. Q3 and Q1 is similar, and Q4 tends to be slightly higher. So nothing flashy, nothing exceptional, unless anything exceptional happened compared to other years. Still from finance, and the previous conference, there was information provided that the costs connected with CIT should be minimum at the level of low percentage points. Can you therefore expect the decrease of the effective tax rate from 9% to lower in the next quarters? Yes. The complete tax rate will be known at the end of the year, because then we are aware of all the settlements connected with R&D, and we don't expect any other tax rate for the whole of 2025 compared to 2024, because the regulations have not changed and we continue the deductions. However, in Q1, 3, 4, the higher tax rate stems from the fact that we were including the surplus from the last year rather than settling the tax. Towards the end of the year, it will be very similar to 2024, and in the first 3 quarters, it will be closer to 10%. Thank you very much. A question from Przemek Staniszewski about the R&D relief. Your software house business, is it treated as IP or development production that could be classified as qualifying for preferential taxation? What are the prospects? Every company as part of Spyrosoft Group that is operational in Poland has obtained tax office interpretations to deduct such costs. This is connected with the transfer of intellectual property rights. Thank you very much. Rafał Użyński, how much time does the company need to increase the rates from customers to compensate for the increase, the drop in the first margin by 4 percentage points quarter on quarter? Let me remind you that when it comes to the first margin level, it's not only about the rates that make a difference. It is also connected with the changes in the market when it comes to employment. It's easier for us to attract employees, and we find it easier to attract freelancers. Also, the FX rate makes a difference. So you cannot answer straightforwardly how much we would need to increase the rates by to obtain the 4 percentage points, because it might turn out that the FX rate will cause that, or the situation in terms of employment. Could you add anything to this, guys? Yes. It's exactly as Wojtek has said. It's a function of at least several variables, involving several variables, and you cannot foresee how much time it will take us to increase the rates. Of course, you could say that ceteris paribus, how much time it would take, but this is very theoretical, and it shouldn't be the subject of any analysis. But we could say that unless nothing else changes, it will take us half a year. However, since it's one of numerous variables, it's hard to estimate anything. But we could say another thing. I'm not sure if it will help you. We assume that our sales rates will increase a little bit over the next couple of years, and it will be more dynamic than the remunerations. But it's enough for the FX rates to go up or down by 5%, and the whole mathematics doesn't work. Thank you very much. So much for finance. We're back to the sales and revenues category. Robert Fiołek is asking, by saying that sales will be growing in the next quarters, quoting the CEO, you are addressing the analogical quarters from last year, or is the increase to be from the base to Q1? It's actually from Sebastian. Let me take it. As you know, by definition, we don't forecast, but I was talking about the quarter to quarter of the previous year. However, it's obvious that we are trying to make sure that the quarter-on-quarter revenues are higher each year. Okay, a question about the sales and update of the potential fixed contract with Magna and the Polish financial institution. What is your take on it? Is the situation looking up or down? I can also take it. When it comes to the contract with Magna, the contract that we had concluded has been finalized. We've delivered what we were supposed to. The customer is happy, but the situation in the automotive market is difficult. We're continuing our talks, but you have to keep in mind that Magna is a company delivering its solution to OEMs in the automotive, and a lot will depend on whether Magna will win a contract and what sort of contract it will win for, say, Volkswagen or any other company manufacturing cars. So at this moment, we have no new involvement with Magna, but we're working on it. And when it comes to the financial institution, I know it takes time, but the ball is still in the court, and hopefully the topic will soon be concluded. In major financial institutions, things tend to last long, but the thing is still in progress. That contract is still realistic. I think we can share something more with you. Is that per the latest information was that in June, the board of that institution will be voting on that contract. So that's what we know. Please keep your fingers crossed for the good vote, for them to vote correctly. Thank you. Back to finance for a moment, actually taxes. There are interpretations stating that the code generated by AI is not a work. Do you think that the increase in AI support in projects might make a difference from the tax relief point of view that the group is using? Well, let me just answer the question, but let me come back to the effective tax rate, that we can expect the same tax rate for 2024 as for 2024. But we have to keep in mind that the reliefs only apply in Poland, which means that if the increase from international companies increases, then that rate might insignificantly increase. We'll know that till the end of the year. When it comes to the question relating to AI, we don't use such code when it comes to R&D, but you have to keep in mind that the AI projects are door openers and they don't represent any majority in the projects that we pursue, and in line with the interpretations, such a code is not a transfer of IP. And it needs to be emphasized that I've seen several contracts where the customer emphasized that we could not generate the code by using Gen AI. Therefore, it's not that AI that our developers use AI all that much. Mostly, it's the code is generated by people on their own, and we have such an interpretation in place, and we're sticking to that. There's one more aspect to this. We are implementing AI, not necessarily by using it in order to generate code. If someone thinks that the programmer sits, presses a button, and the code gets generated, that's not the case. Firstly, a lot of input is necessary to generate anything that makes sense. Then you obviously have to test it, and a major proportion of our AI revenues stems from the fact that we implement AI solutions, AI-based solutions. So generating code by AI was one thing, and the another thing is that our customers pay us for implementing some machine learning models. At this moment, it doesn't matter how the code is generated, because it's not only about code generation. Let me just observe that this issue is hugely complex in legal terms, but because sometimes AI-generated code is then transformed by programmers. Practice will probably show, but I don't expect that it would have an impact on what we're doing today. Thank you very much for the in-depth explanations. At this moment, I don't see any questions. Now is your chance to type any questions you have. We're obviously at your disposal also between our meetings. You're all invited to contact ourselves or the company directly. We're open to communication, but this is the moment when you can type the last question for this meeting. If we don't have any such questions, then we'll be calling it a day by and by. So asking questions once, twice, no new questions. Can you wrap up, Mr. President, and we'll be concluding it. Thank you very much for listening to the presentations. Thank you very much for your questions. Should you have any questions later on, kindly ask them by email, and you're also kindly invited to the next conference. Have a nice day and goodbye.